Hi, I'm Maria DeBassi, VP of Business Development and Alliances at Compliance AI, and I'm with you today to cover a very important topic on how to navigate regulatory change during a pandemic. The novel coronavirus has disrupted everyday life in countless ways, from social distancing to school and business closures. Yet one change that has been overlooked as we navigate this pandemic has been a torrent of new regulatory mandates. As the pandemic potentially drags the economy into a recession, multiple federal agencies, including the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, and the CFPB, have pledged to help businesses survive the downturn. These agencies and the Conference of State Bank Supervisors have issued a joint statement pledging to offer regulatory assistance to banks whose customers are being negatively affected by this pandemic. The regulators are also urging banks to do their part during this global crisis. Regulators recommend that financial institutions work constructively with borrowers and other customers in affected communities. The Department of Housing and Urban Development recently announced a moratorium on foreclosures and evictions for more than 30 million Americans whose home mortgages are backed by the Federal Housing Administration, Fannie Mae, or Freddie Mac. With another 40 million renters and 5 million homeowners not covered by this moratorium, more protections could be on the way as both the federal and state governments seek to counter skyrocketing unemployment rates. And it's not just the financial industry that faces a rapidly changing regulatory landscape. Companies around the world learned the hard way that their existing business continuity and disaster recovery plans didn't adequately account for a worldwide pandemic that not only disrupted supply chains, but also forced workers and consumers to stay home for weeks and months at a time. A recent survey by Compliance Week found that 45% of companies did not have a plan in place to address the pandemic, while 55% of compliance officers reported that they are now spending between 25 and 100% of their time on crisis-related activities. For instance, in the insurance industry, COVID-19 is triggering an avalanche of new state-level regulations. Massachusetts and New Jersey are considering bills that would require insurers to cover coronavirus-related business losses, while Nevada has passed a new law that caps what insurers can charge patients for doctor visits and examinations related to COVID-19. Nevada's emergency legislation also prevents insurance companies from charging for the COVID-19 test or any vaccines that may emerge. In states where lawmakers have yet to address the pandemic, lawyers have filled the void and are filing numerous lawsuits arguing that businesses ranging from entertainment to restaurants to tribal casinos should have their coronavirus losses covered. Those efforts could be in vain since many policies include virus-specific exclusions, but here again, new state laws such as those proposed in Massachusetts and New Jersey could force insurers to rewrite those policies. The disruptions caused by the coronavirus, while chaotic, simply build on recent trends. Ever since the financial crisis of 2008, highly regulated businesses in key verticals, including financial, insurance, and healthcare, have needed to track a complex and constantly changing regulatory environment. For instance, according to a Boston Consulting Group report, the number of regulatory changes relevant to the financial industry more than tripled from 2011 to 2017, reaching an average of 200 per day. When you factor in the various state, federal, international regulations banks must track, the problem only gets worse. And when you add on accelerating changes intended to combat the economic damage caused by the coronavirus, relying on manual processes becomes untenable very quickly. Taken together, the chaos caused by this pandemic highlights why businesses should turn to modern tools such as a cloud-based regulatory change management software, simply to keep up with their constantly evolving obligations. And that is why the COVID-19 crisis will drive compliance modernization. Many businesses won't have a choice but to modernize. During a crisis, any crisis, pandemic or otherwise, Businesses simply don't have the time to waste on manual, labor-intensive, error-prone tasks that can be handled more reliably and efficiently by software. To ensure that your RCM solution will streamline your compliance efforts during chaotic times, seek solutions that help experts make decisions rather than trying to replace experts altogether, and choose tools that reduce noise and help you focus on changes consequential to your business. And now I'd like to show you how we manage regulatory change on our platform, Compliance.ai.
Compliance AI greatly simplifies the regulatory change management processes within financial organizations, especially during this pandemic. The combined solution of the partnership with MetricStream provides users with the best of both worlds: near real-time access to Compliance AI's comprehensive and metadata-rich regulatory changes seamlessly accessible within MetricStream's regulatory change management module. Our users, most of whom are mid to large-sized banks, financial services organizations, advisory firms, and fintech, are using our solutions to greatly simplify their regulatory change management processes. On average, this leads to more than a 30% decrease in operational costs within compliance alone. The problem we're solving is very much an epidemic within regulated organizations. On any given week, a mid-sized organization operating in the United States would be subject to 200 to 300 regulatory documents of various forms, all the way from proposed rules to enforcement actions and everything in between. And yet the approach we're taking in many cases to address these regulation changes is very much the same solution we used over 10 years ago, when the pace, volume, and complexity of regulatory changes were much more manageable. The numbers were significantly lower, and the complexity was not nearly where it is today. We threw bodies at it, we used consultants, and today that becomes cost inefficient, error-prone, inconsistent, and of course wastes company time. Not paying attention to it results in both financial and reputational consequences. Our vision is truly transforming how regulated organizations deal with compliance risk through a RegTech solution. Our solution is one that really serves various players and team members within the organization. People who've been tasked with answering the question of, did we collect all the information? Do we know all the changes by the regulators? Do we care about all of them? Which ones are important, and how do we track these changes and react to them? And finally, how do we report on everything that's happened to other stakeholders, whether they are within compliance, the Office of the General Counsel, within the risk team, or other business units such as IT? We had conversations with hundreds of compliance officers, our users. We investigated the problems they were facing. A day in the life of the compliance officer. What's keeping you up at night? What's causing you problems today? First and foremost, it was being in the know, having access to that comprehensive, continuous coverage of changes, and yet being able to focus on the ones that are relevant to your organization. How do you do that today? You Google agency websites, you gather content through newsletter subscriptions, and combine it through an Excel spreadsheet. You then organize and check for missing content, and the next morning, you start all over again. The next problem was really what you do after you've brought the content in. Well, compliance teams have to filter it down. You've got 1,000 documents, but only 200 relevant ones. Well, how do you arrive at that? You have to read the documents and then ultimately put them into the right buckets in terms of the business or operational topics. And you also need to prioritize them. The process becomes very messy and time-consuming and inconsistent over time. The next step is to assess, what's the risk to the organization? How do we react and create action plans? We found this to be a highly manual process. Oftentimes, email is used to ask people questions and to drive tasks. Deadlines are numerous, and that leads to uncertainty throughout the organization. And finally, now that I have all those assessments, how do you know who did what when, before, during, and after the rulemaking process? Well, we looked at this ground up and took a fully automated approach to gathering content from all sources, federal, state, independent, international. We viewed a wide variety of document types and augmented that with content from experts and industry sources in the form of white papers and advice. We then normalized it and cleaned it and made it available through a single repository on a near real-time basis. We also built purpose-built models that helped classify changes into business or operational topics such as cybersecurity, privacy, ICO, cryptocurrency, lending, crowdfunding, and other business-specific topics that are relevant to the organization. We extracted key information from these documents automatically. Key dates, common close date, effective and publication date, the related regulations and rules that are referencing a specific change. We extracted key obligations so that you don't have to spend hours, days, and in many cases months just establishing the inventory of obligation for a change or for rules that have been published. And all that leads to having a filtered view so that you can reduce the size of that funnel quite dramatically. Go from a few hundred documents that you have to assess per week to maybe a handful, and within that handful have the visibility to then know which ones are more important than the other. That saves you time and also helps you prioritize more easily. Compliance AI also offers a seamless integration of its content into the metric stream regulatory change management solution that triggers regulatory reviews and analysis and workflow activities from within the metric stream GRC environment. The end result empowers compliance teams to make more focused and consistent compliance decisions in a faster and more scalable pace. I'm going to do a demo now of the solution where we look at these different angles. First, we want to show you the way that we bring all the content together through a very simple to use product. Next, how we use the solution to filter out the content down to a funnel that is very relevant for research. And then how we make it easier to react to these changes, especially during a pandemic. Once you log in, you land on your personalized regulatory dashboard that shows the latest agency activity, trends, and relevant industry news. This is an effective alternative to the manual approach used today to track regulatory changes. You now have an always-on, near real-time, accurate, and consistent depiction of changes. To personalize your dashboard, click on the default filters. The topic filters include Compliance AI's pre-classified high-level topics. This helps narrow your focus to regulatory content only relevant to particular business areas. You'll see these topic tags on various documents. Topics are completely extensible by the organization, and you can extend this yourself and create an endless list of topic classifications to fit your business requirements. Next, you can select the Regulatory Sources tab to select the agencies, both US and international, that you're interested in tracking. In addition to the popular financial regulatory agencies, we have hundreds of agencies available in the drop-down to select from. And finally, the mainstream and industry news sources you want to follow, which include regulatory insights from a diverse group of law firms and regulatory thought leaders. And now, returning to the dashboard, you will see the updates in the dashboard view instantly reflected from your default filter selections. The timeline view prioritizes regulatory changes relevant to you based on publication or upcoming key dates, providing you an organized view of your must-read regulatory documents. Let's take a look at this document. You can see topic classification tags, important key dates, and other relevant attributes such as CFRs and summary information, along with automatically created abstracts, all of which are presented to help you quickly identify whether this is a document you need to read further. Select the Changes tab in the right-hand panel to see the track changes from when the document was first published. Using the Compliance.ai diffing feature, users can clearly and easily see what has changed from one version of a regulatory document to another. Our clients have been able to quickly identify critical updates on documents, such as proposed rules, which can go through several revisions before becoming final. This allows our users to focus on analyzing the impact of specific changes rather than spending the time identifying the changes. Finding out obligations is a messy and time-consuming process, and we help simplify and speed it up. We're taking actionable intelligence even further by automatically surfacing obligations, rights, constraints, and exceptions from within regulatory documents. Ultimately, this helps our clients quickly identify what is applicable to them and determine how such obligations map to their internal processes. You can further refine the documents in your timeline by selecting the filter button. Apply your selections, agencies, regulation, act, keyword, business name, topics, or document types to see a more focused view of the content. Select the documents and add them to a folder, email, or download the collection as a CSV file to use within a spreadsheet. If this is a concept you'd like to monitor going forward, turn it into an alert so that you can be notified of any changes. Here's an example of the automated email summaries you'll receive when you subscribe to an alert. The news section is structured similarly to the timeline, but shows media content such as agency news documents and industry news. The insights are interactive graphs that provide trends across agencies and document types. These insights help you with resource planning and are great predictors of an agency's upcoming activity. You can filter the graph and interact with any section to see the related documents. Another view that is highly popular with our users is the Enforcement Action Tracker, or Enforcement Explorer. Here, we're narrowing down the focus and specifically showing you regulatory updates that ended up being enforcement actions with the metadata such as penalty, violation, respondent information, along with the classification of business and operational topic. In the resources section, less frequently changing content like pub law, CFRs, US code, statutes, and state codes that are relevant to the financial sector are displayed. Our solution is built using our novel approach to artificial intelligence, which is expert in the loop, one that is not looking at machine learning as a black box. In sharp contrast to that, we provide a transparent and explainable AI through our expert in the loop mechanism, which allows for explainable classification, rating, ranking, and data extraction. Compliance AI offers a seamless integration of its content into the MetricStream regulatory change management solution. MetricStream users can gain access to near real-time, relevant regulatory intelligence across jurisdictions from various agencies, including regulatory publications from press and independent agencies, white papers, millions of existing rules, executive orders, enforcement actions, and notices. As the regulatory landscape continues to shift, compliance experts must change along with it. Modern RCM software that delivers automated insights, trend analysis, and remediation recommendations will help your compliance experts transition away from reactive fire drill planning so they can remain productive and proactive when the next crisis hits. Thank you for your attention, and please feel free to contact us if you have any questions.